Okay, so we're going to talk about fractions, decimals, and percents. We've done part of this before. Do you remember when you took your memorization quiz where you had to memorize like 1/4 equals 0.25 and 25%? Okay, so now we're actually going to talk about how to change them using your calculator. Okay? So if you don't have your calculator, you do want to make sure you have that out, all right? Looking at the diagram up at the top, okay, you can use this for a lot of them, but some of them you don't even need to use this. There'll be an easier way. But of course, fraction, decimal, and percent, and it's how we move from one to the other. The biggest thing I want you to remember about a fraction, decimal, and percent is they show the same thing. They show the same value, okay? So the reason they show the same value, we can convert them from one to the other. All right, if you got 25 out of 100, what percent do you have?
You got
25%, okay? So that's what we're going to figure out is how do we change from one to the other if they mean the same thing. Looking at writing a decimal as a fraction, we've done this before. Someone read this decimal for me, number 1. How do you read that?
0 and 448 hundredths.
Not quite. Thousandths, okay? There's 3 decimal places, so it'd be thousandths. So the biggest thing with this is you're going to write what you say. So this would be 448 thousandths. Yes, write what you say. We did. Some of it we did, but I'm going to show you how they all 3 relate together. And we didn't have a calculator the first time we did it this year. So we've got 448, and we put that in as a fraction, and we simplify it. So your simplified fraction that is equivalent to this decimal would be 56 over 125. And that's all you do. So decimal to a fraction, you're going to write what you say. All right? What about this decimal? What are we going to do with the 1? It's a whole number, so we're going to keep it a whole number. So that would be our whole number, and then our decimal is 875 thousandths. So again, our whole number stays the same, and I want to simplify 875 thousandths, and it gives you 7/8. So again, all you're doing, write what you say and then simplify. Easy enough, right? Yes. Well, we're going to talk. The others are a little bit more complicated. This one is probably the easiest. You write what you say and then as a fraction. Now, will my denominators, when I initially, not when it's simplified, but the first fraction that I write, will I ever have a denominator that is not a tenth, 100th, 1000th, so forth? No, because they're all decimals. So if it's repeating, great question. What would that be? If I write it well, and that's for like another day extra info. But out of curiosity, do you remember?
A third.
So what would that be?
0.3.
Right. So anything that's a repeating decimal, you write it as a fraction over 9 or 99 or 999. Yes. Okay. All right. Look at number 3. What decimal is that?
0 and 008.
8 what? Thousandths. Okay. So again, we simplify that. 8 over 1,000. And that gives us 1 over 125. Okay. So again, decimal to a fraction, you're just going to write what you say and then simplify. Now, looking at our chart, how do we go from a fraction to a decimal? We divide. And when you divide, it's always going to be numerator divided by denominator. Okay? So, here we go. First one we have is 7 over 20. So 7 divided by 20 gives us 0.35. So that is your decimal equivalent. Now, here's a little bonus information for the day. Do you remember I told you the second key is like your shift button on a computer? And these little words in blue right above it, you see right here where it says F to D and D to F? Okay? So that means fraction to decimal and decimal to fraction. So what I can do is I can put in my fraction, 7 over 20. I have to push the second button and then that fraction to decimal key and enter. It will change a fraction to a decimal and a decimal to a fraction. If I put in my decimal, 0.35, fraction to decimal, it tells me the fraction. But what is so much easier? 7 divided by 20. Knowing that that fraction is the same as division, all you got to do to change it to a decimal is divide. Okay? What about number 2? We have a whole number, so what do?
4.6.
We leave it to the side.
You divide the
3.
by 5.
Yep. So 4.6. This is not bad, is it? Good. All right, so then we've got 11 divided by 25. And that would give us 44 hundredths. Okay, so again, to change a fraction to a decimal, we're simply going to divide numerator by denominator. And these are your little hints right here that you're going to need to be able to go back and find when you start working on your homework. Okay?
You have, with the percentage to fractions, you have to think about that part because what most people don't realize, 8%, you wouldn't go to 0.8 because that'd be 0.8, that'd be 80%.
That's right. But we're writing this as a fraction, not a decimal. So the thing with a percent, how do I go from percent to fraction? You see here on our triangle, percent to fraction. What do we do?
Divided by 100.
It looks like it, but we're actually not. We're actually putting the percent over 100. Because that word percent, okay, percent, what does that prefix cent mean? Century, centennial, 100. So percent literally means out of 100.
Wouldn't that be a suffix?
In this sense, this one is a suffix, but I'm talking about like centennial or century. Yeah. Say like, no, it is a suffix in this. But I was talking about like using the word century or centennial would be a prefix. Okay, so let's look at this. If we have 8%, 8 out of 100. And then all we have to do is simplify. And that gives us 2 out of 25. Yeah. Because it's a percent. It's out of 100. Now, there is one little exception I want to show you in just a second. All right, what about 76%? 76 out of 100, which is 19 out of 25. Okay, what about 291%? Is it still over 100? No. Yes, it is. Because it is a percent. It's still out of 100. So 291%. What happens if you have 100% of something? You have one whole, okay? So if you have 200%, if I put that into simplify, it tells you now have a mixed number. So it is 2, because it's 2 wholes, and 91 over 100. And remember, that little u is just a space. Okay, so again, to write a percent as a fraction, you write percent over 100. Okay, there is one time that this will have an exception. And I want to talk about that because you have one on your homework. Let's say we have 14.5%. Do I want to put a decimal over 100? No, I don't want a decimal and a fraction combined. That's just, it's not going to look right. So, if we do this, okay, and I have 14.5 over 100, that gives me a decimal. Okay? Then I can take this and turn it into what? A fraction, which is 145 thousandths. So instead of it being over 100, so basically what I did is I turned this into a decimal, I divided by 100, and then I changed it to a fraction from there. The biggest thing I want you to see, and that's why I like the triangle, because they're all related, they're all intertwined. So I can change something to a decimal before I change it to a fraction if it helps me, or I can change something to a fraction to change it to a percent if I need to. However you need to do it, yeah. I did. Is that good?
You're smart.
I just thought about it. I don't know. Yeah, I did a random number out of the blue. Okay, so this is our one exception that we're not just automatically going to put it over 100, okay? So that one would actually become 145 over 1,000, okay? All right, so write it over at write percent over 100, and then we simplify. Always simplify if given the opportunity. Now, fraction as a percent. This one is actually going to take us 2 steps. What 2 steps, looking at our triangle, do you think we have to do?
Multiply by 5.
Other way around.
To a decimal.
We've got to divide, then multiply. Because we've got to go from a fraction to a decimal and then to a percent. Alright? So, if we look at this, I'll have 3 over 40. So, my first step is divide numerator by denominator, which if we do 3 divided by 40, that gives me 0.075. And then how do I change a decimal to a percent? Times what? 100. Okay? What happens when you multiply a number by 100?
You're adding 2 powers of 10.
Absolutely. We're adding 2 powers of 10. Not necessarily just adding a 0, but what you're doing is you're actually moving your decimal point how many places? 2. You're moving it 2 places to the right. So put yourself a little note here that you're really moving your decimal place 2 places to the right. So if I have 0.075 times 100, that gives us 7.5%. No. As long as you're doing this, yeah, your calculator's doing most of the work for you.
Can we just write 7.5%?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yay!
Now, looking at the next one, we have 11 over 25. What's my first step? Divide. So 11 divided by 25 gives me 0.44. Okay?
We used that one earlier.
We did? What is this as a percentage?
44%.
You got it. Because guys, look, you don't even have to know really that I've got to multiply this by 100 because you know my decimal place is going to move 2 places. So if I move that 2 places, that gives me 44%. Okay, 1/8. That gives me 0.125. And what would my percentage be? 12.5%. And all I did was move it 2 places or multiply it by 100. If you don't feel comfortable moving your decimal, just multiply by 100. And that'll tell you what your percentage is. But be very careful. Do you see how my decimal and percent have different values? Or they have different numbers even though it's the same value? This percent sign is huge. If you don't have that, then these are not equivalent. Okay?
Okay. What if you write the same number since they're already the same?
If they're... this?
Like, what is it equivalent to? If it didn't say as a percent, you could just write the same thing.
No, it'll tell you what to, it'll say as a fraction or percent or decimal. Now, when you ask what you got on a grade and it's out of something other than 100, this is what you're doing, guys. You're dividing. You take your top number, divide it by the bottom number, move your decimal 2 places, and that gives you your grade. Your percentage out of 100, okay? So this is exactly what you're doing. All right, let's flip to the back real quick. So these are the two easiest ones. Let's start with the second one. If we're writing each decimal as a percent, what do I do to go from decimal to percent? Okay, we're going to multiply by 100 or move our decimal 2 places to the right. Okay? So 0.02 would be what percentage? 2%. Because all I did was move my decimal 2 places. What about number 2?
0.803%.
Okay, see how we move it 2 places here? So that'd be 0.803%. And then the last one?
1,620%.
There we go. 2 places. And again, all I'm doing, guys, on any of these is multiplying by 100. And that'll tell you what your new percentage is.
So we for the decimal to percentage, we can really just move 2 places.
That's all you gotta do. You're moving it 2 places.
Earlier.
Okay, so let's look at the top. Okay, now we're going the opposite direction. Now we want to go from a percent to a decimal. So if I multiply going the other way, what am I doing now? I'm going to divide by 100. Or, if I'm going to divide by 100, I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left.
Yeah.
So if I move my decimal 2 places to the left here, or divide 9 by 100, that gives me 0.09. What about 924? 9.24. Again, we're just moving our decimal places. This one's a little tricky, because what have I got to do if I move it 2 places here?
0.0078.
Very good. You got to tack that 0 on there. Okay? What about 57%?
0.57. Yep.
Okay? 19%?
0.19.
And we could say that is 1900ths. Alright, be careful. What about 57.3%?
573,000.
Awesome. So 573 thousandths. And again, we're dividing by 100 or moving your decimal 2 places to the left. Alright? And those are the opposite of each other. So to go between decimal and percent and decimal, you're just sliding that decimal back and forth.
What are we going to be doing the most?
What are you going to be doing the most?
All of them.
All of them. Yeah, I mean, there's no one that you're going to do more than the other. I think, actually, I'm going to let you work on this in just a minute. I think I'm going to change what we're doing tomorrow. I think I want to make this big, ginormous chart, and you have to fill in all the ones that are missing. Because, no, you have homework.
Go home and play Fortnite. I don't want to.